All right. Talk about Heidegger today. Heidegger is a big figure in all of this. He had a lot of influence. So Martin Heidegger was born in September 26, 1889 in Meßkirch, that means Mass Church, literally, in southwest Germany to a Catholic family. His father worked as sexton in the local church. In his early youth, Heidegger was being prepared for the priesthood. In 1903, he went to the high school in Konstanz, where the church supported him by a scholarship. And then in 1906, he moved to Freiburg. All right, so that's in Baden, which is the southwest Germany, Black Forest area. His interest in philosophy first arose during his high school studies in Freiburg when, being 17, he read Franz Brentano's book. So there's that Franz Brentano again. On the manifold meaning of being, according to Aristotle. By his own account, it was this work that inspired his lifelong quest for the meaning of being. In 1909, after completing high school, he became a Jesuit novice, but was discharged within a month for reasons of health. He then entered Freiburg University, where he studied theology. However, a deteriorating health condition and perhaps a lack of a strong spiritual vocation led Heidegger in 1911 to leave the seminary and break off his training for the priesthood. He took up studies in philosophy, mathematics, and natural sciences. It was also at that time that he first became influenced by Edmund Husserl. So this is all it goes from one generation to another. All of this, one is influenced by this, the other one by that. It just goes on and on. He studied Husserl's logical investigations. In 1913, he completed a doctorate in philosophy with a dissertation on the doctrine of judgment in psychologism under the direction of the neo-Kantian philosopher Heinrich Rickert. So we're in Kantianism again, and remember what I said, he's the source of all of this stuff, and it's all in some way just a variation on Kant, just as, there's theme and variations in music. That's all it is. The outbreak of the First World War in 1914 interrupted briefly Heidegger's academic career. He was enlisted in the army, but after 2 months released because of health reasons. Hoping to take over the chair of Catholic philosophy at Freiburg, Heidegger now began to work on his habilitation thesis on Duns Scotus's doctrine of categories and meaning. The second qualifying dissertation that would win him a license to teach at the university. The dissertation was completed in 1915. In the same year, Heidegger became a Privatdozent, or unsalaried lecturer. He taught mostly courses in Aristotelian and scholastic philosophy and regarded himself as standing in the service of the Catholic worldview. Nevertheless, his turn from theology to philosophy was soon to be followed by another turn. In 1916, he became to know personally Edmund Husserl. He's the phenomenologist, who joined the Freiburg faculty. Then in 1917, he married Thea Elfriede Petri, a Protestant student who had attended his courses since the fall of 1915. His career was again interrupted in 1918 when he was called up for active military duty. He served as a weatherman and on the Western Front during the last 3 months of the war. So I wouldn't say he had a distinguished military career. When he returned to Freiburg, within a few weeks, he announced his break with the system of Catholicism, got himself appointed as Husserl's assistant, and began lecturing in a new, insightful way. His lectures on phenomenology and his creative interpretations of Aristotle would earn him now wide acclaim. And yet Heidegger was not Husserl's faithful follower. He was not captivated by his master's later developments, by his neo-Kantian turn towards transcendental subjectivity, and even less by his Cartesian turn, but preferred his earlier work, Logical Investigations. Laboring over the question of the things themselves, he soon began to radically interpret Husserl's phenomenology. So, this is all from one of those encyclopedic philosophies, Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This did not come from my head because I don't know that much about it. In 1923, Heidegger moved to Marburg University, where, with the help of Paul Natrop, he obtained a position of associate professor. Between 1923 and 1928, he enjoyed there the most fruitful years of his entire teaching. His students testified to the originality of his insight and the intensivity of his philosophical questioning. Heidegger extended the scope of his lectures and taught courses on the history of philosophy, time, logic, phenomenology, Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas, Kant, and Leibniz. But since 1916, he had published nothing, and the lack of publication stood in the way of his further academic career. Finally, in February 1927, partly because of an administrative pressure, his fundamental but also unfinished treatise Being and Time appeared. Within a few years, this book was recognized as a truly epoch-making work of 20th century philosophy. It earned Heidegger, in the fall of 1927, the full professorship at Marburg, and 1 year later, after Husserl's retirement from teaching, the chair of philosophy at Freiburg University. Although Being and Time is dedicated to Husserl, upon its publication, Heidegger's departure from Husserl's phenomenology and the differences between two philosophers became apparent. Next works, published in 1929, What is Metaphysics? On the Essence of Ground, and Kant and the Problem of Metaphysics, had further revealed how far Heidegger moved from neo-Kantianism and phenomenology of consciousness to his phenomenological ontology. Heidegger's life entered in a new controversial stage with Hitler's rise to power. In September 1930, Adolf Hitler's National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, that was the official name, by the way, of the Nazi Party. He took over in the 1920s this fledgling and insignificant political party known as that, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which doesn't exactly sound like a right-wing organization. And so, but then the Workers' Party sort of got dropped, and then it became Nationalsozialismus, But that was the official name of the Nazi Party, what you see there. Became the second largest party in Germany, and on January 30th, 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of the German Republic. Hindenburg was still alive. Heidegger, who before was virtually apolitical, in the early 1930s became politically involved. On April 21st, 1933, he was elected rector of Freiburg University by the faculty and accepted this politically charged post with the motive, as he later claimed, to resist the political control of the university. On May 3rd, 1933, he joined the NSDAP party. So he is considered a bad guy, of course. I mean, apart from he is a bad guy, but anything that he wrote or said or did, even the leftists despise him because of that. On May 27th, 1933, he delivered his inaugural rector's address on the self-affirmation of the German university, whose ambiguous text is frequently interpreted as an expression of his support of Hitler's regime. So he was very much in favor of Hitler's regime. There is a little doubt that during his tenure as rector, Heidegger became instrumental to Nazi policies and, willingly or not, helped to transform the university into a National Socialist mold. And yet, 1 year later, on April 23rd, 1934, Heidegger resigned the rectorate and took no further part in politics. His inaugural rector's address was found incompatible with the party line, and its text was eventually banned by the Nazis. Sounds like Google and what?
What does Nazi mean in German?
It's just short for National. You see, so they were called for short Nazis, Nationalsozialismus. So that's all it is. But I mean that business of suppressing. That's I mean that's what they did in Germany during the Nazi regime. Google and Facebook and all they are essentially doing the same thing as the Nazis did. For some time, let's see. I might have to get this. I'm expecting a number of phone calls today. No, I can take that later. There was no trace there of the biologism which sustained Nazism, meaning the race theories, nor of anti-Semitism. Because he was no longer involved in the party's activity, Heidegger's membership in the NSDAP became a mere formality. Various restrictions were put on his freedom to publish and attend conferences. In his lectures of the late 1930s and early 1940s, especially those which he gave during the period in which he was writing contributions to philosophy, he expressed covert criticism of Nazi ideology. For some time, he was under the surveillance of the Gestapo. He was finally humiliated in 1944 when he was declared the most expendable member of the faculty and sent to the Rhine to dig trenches. 1944, that means he's already in his late 50s, mid-50s. Yes?
What does
Expendable
expendable
means able to be put aside, as someone who is not necessary. In Nazi Germany, being expendable would, might get you into a concentration camp. Because of the ambiguity of Heidegger's attitude toward Nazism, the period of his life under Hitler's regime and the relationship between his philosophy and political involvement are still the subject of controversy and provoke a heated debate. Following Germany's defeat in the Second World War, Heidegger was in 1945 forbidden to teach and in 1946 dismissed from his chair of philosophy because of alleged Nazi sympathies. The ban was lifted in 1949. The 1930s are not only marked by Heidegger's controversial involvement in politics, but also by a change in his thinking which is known as the turn, die Kehre. In his lectures and writings that followed the turn, he became less systematic and often more obscure than in his fundamental work, Being and Time, which is one of the most obscure things that you could ever read in your whole life. He turned to the exegesis of philosophical and literary texts, especially of the pre-Socratics, Thales, and that means the early Greek philosophers, but also of Kant, Hegel, Nietzsche, and Hölderlin, and makes this his way of philosophizing. A recurring theme of that time was the essence of truth. During the decade between 1931 and 1940, Heidegger offered 5 courses under this title. Could you imagine that? The essence of truth is very simple. It's the conformity of the mind to the thing. That's the end of the sentence. That's all you have to know about it. That's all you have to know. That's it. Adequatio intellectus et re. What is that, 5 words? That's all you have to know. He gave lectures on it. His preoccupation with the question of language and his fascination with poetry were expressed in lectures on Hölderlin, which he gave between 1934 and 1936. Towards the end of the 1930s and the beginning of the 1940s, he taught 5 courses on Nietzsche, could you imagine, in which he submitted to criticism the tradition of Western metaphysics, described to him as nihilistic. Could you imagine? Western metaphysics is nihilistic, and made allusions to the absurdity of war and the bestiality of his contemporaries. Finally, his reflection upon Western philosophical tradition and an endeavor to open a space for philosophizing outside it brought him to pre-Socratic thought. All the Heraclitus, Parmenides, Thales, they all made huge errors. Okay. In the course of lectures entitled An Introduction to Metaphysics, offered in the summer semester of 1935 and published in 1953, which can be seen as a bridge between earlier and later Heidegger, the pre-Socratics were no longer a subject of mere passing remarks as in Heidegger's earlier works. The course was not about early Greek thought, and yet the pre-Socratics became there the pivotal center of discussion. It is clear that with the evolution of Heidegger's thinking in the 1930s, they gained in importance in his work. During the 1940s, in addition to giving courses on Aristotle, Kant, and Hegel, Heidegger lectured extensively on Anaximander, Parmenides, and Heraclitus. Those are pre-Socratics. Socrates being, that means before Socrates. The rest you can, well, it's probably. During the last 3 decades of his life, from the mid-1940s to the mid-1970s, Heidegger wrote and published much, but in comparison to earlier decades, there was no significant change in his philosophy. In his insightful essays and lectures such as What Are Poets For?, a letter on humanism, the question concerning technology, the way to language, time and being, and the end of philosophy and the task of thinking, he addressed different issues concerning modernity, labored on his original philosophy of history, the history of being, imagine the history of being, and attempted to clarify his way of thinking after the turn. Most of his time was divided between his home in Freiburg, his second study in Meßkirch, and his mountain hut in the Black Forest. But he escaped provincialism by being frequently visited by his friends, including, among others, the political philosopher Hannah Arendt, the physicist Werner Heisenberg, and the theologian Rudolf Bultmann, who was a Protestant, extremely rationalistic. The psychologist Ludwig Binswanger, and by traveling more widely than ever before. He lectured on what is philosophy at Cerisy-la-Salle in 1955, on Hegel and the Greeks at Aix-en-Provence in 1957. He visited Greece in 1962 and again in 1967. In 1966, Heidegger attempted to justify his political involvement during the Nazi regime in an interview with Der Spiegel, which means the Mirror, entitled Only God Can Save Us. It was published only 10 years later after his death. One of his last teaching assignments was his seminar on Parmenides, which he offered in Zeringen in 1973. Heidegger died on May 26, 1976, and was buried in the churchyard at Meßkirch. To the very end, imagine getting a Catholic burial after all that. He worked on various projects, including the extensive Gesamtausgabe, the complete edition of his works. Ausgabe is edition, which means a give out. It's in German. Editio. It's really in Latin, edare, to give out. You see, editio. So all the Italian, Spanish, etc. It's all English edition. In the same, they just take the Ausgabe, to give out. So it looks different, but it means the same thing. Gesamt means total or together, and so the so that's in German is not as difficult, but you have to realize that like in airports, the Gepäckausgabe is the baggage, where you get the baggage. The pack give out. See, Gepäck it means your baggage. The baggage give out, but you can see the word pack in it in English. You know, the Gepäck. I think there's a C in it. Ausgabe. And they put everything is in one word. Where we would break that up, they make one word. So you have to realize that when you see the long German words. That's not the hard. Everybody thinks, oh, the German words. It's not very hard to figure out how they just put it all together. You know, baggage, whatever. We split that word. We split those two words, but they just put them all together. That's not the hardest part of German. There's other hard parts of German. Heidegger, apropos of Husserl, complained that the whole of Western philosophy has forgotten being and has immersed itself in the study of beings. Which is just utter stupidity to say that. Total utter stupidity. And you know that from studying scholastic philosophy, which is the philosophy of Aristotle fundamentally. Properties of being. How stupid could you be to say that? He also complains that being has been confined to two things: abstract being, completely indeterminate, that would be ens with a small e in scholastic philosophy, or being, that is divine being, completely perfect and infinite. And that's stupid too. Because there's something called a finite real being. He's saying that, oh, you just have ens in communi, which is abstract, or you have God. And there's nothing in between. What about a dog? Which is neither an abstract being nor God. I mean, this is really stupid. He doesn't understand the first thing about Aristotelian philosophy. I mean, that's basic. A first-year philosophy student could make that distinction. He's an idiot. He claims that there is a third meaning to this word. He calls this Dasein, being there. Da means there in German. Sein is to be. Dasein. Man is in the unique position of asking the question, what is being? This means, unlike any other being, he has Dasein, or being there. That's really Heidegger in a nutshell, is the Dasein business. It's really, really bad. But he's had a big influence, Heidegger. See, it's that subjectivity. I'm there, and there's something in front of me, and I'm having an experience. It's all that subjectivity business. So, existentialism. This is very important because this is a sort of a subspecies of phenomenology. Phenomenology is the big thing. Heidegger is sort of a sideshow in it, but he's respected in the whole subjectivist philosophy system. But really, Husserl and phenomenology and its subspecies, existentialism, are really operating the world today. So it's important. Remember, ideas rule the world. It's an old saying. Ideas rule the world. So philosophy is very important. The faith is, in that sense, an idea. It changes everything, and liberal ideas change everything. I mean, the French Revolution, all bad ideas during the 18th century led to that. they have bad ideas or good ideas have very, very concrete effects. It's the history of the world. Ideas are the most important things, whether it's the faith, which is in a certain sense an idea, because there are certain ideas connected with the faith, and especially with regard to culture, it's an idea. How government should happen, how the state will be ordered, and day-to-day life be ordered. I mean, all of the leftism that we see today that will have bad effects on the way we live, they're all from ideas. They're bad ideas. If people could be converted from those evil ideas, the earth would be almost a paradise. So, the study of philosophy is very important in that way, in understanding what ideas are operating the world. Nazism was an idea, communism was an idea, still is. So, existentialism is important. The philosophy of existentialism, as the name itself implies, indicates a special concern with the problem of existence, not with each and every type of existence, but with human existence. So, as I said to you before, existentialism is anti-essentialist. They see scholasticism as being essentialist. That is, that the object of the mind is the essence of a created thing. That's standard scholasticism. That just makes them vomit, practically. Because that is something imposing itself on you. This is going to emphasize your experience of things, your daily experience. It is not going to have any kind of metaphysics. It's just going to be, basically how I feel today. All right. The inspiration of contemporary existentialism is to be found in the writings of the Danish Lutheran S.A. Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard was convinced that his countrymen had a false notion of what it means to be a Christian. As he saw it, too many of them regarded Christianity as a doctrine to be understood speculatively and to be grasped intellectually. See, so it's anti-intellectual. This, to him, was but the acceptance of the erroneous notion of Hegel. See, Hegel turned abstraction into a subsistent idea. This idea that runs everything. See, so Hegel is super intellectual. Idea is reality, which again is really stupid. I mean, unbelievably stupid to say that, okay? Who had taught that it was the role of speculative philosophy to comprehend all of the mysteries of religion, even those of Christianity having to do with the Trinity and the Incarnation. So religion had to fit into the idea for Hegel. Kierkegaard was saying, oh, no. So he has an equal and opposite reaction and an equal and opposite error, which is very common, that the error of one extreme engenders the error of the opposite extreme. Kierkegaard, for his part, insisted that Christianity is not an abstract doctrine to be approached in an impersonal and dispassionate manner as though it were a system of speculative truths. On the contrary, Christianity is a way of life, a mode of living that consists in appropriating and assimilating the message of Christ into one's own existence. Sounds like JP2 or any of those modernists. Sounds. If one wanted to call Christianity a doctrine, he should understand that it is a doctrine that proposes to be realized in existence, that the true way of understanding the doctrine of Christianity is to understand its task as one of existing in the doctrine and not of speculating on it. Well-known existentialists are Berdeyev, Martin Buber, who was Jewish, Heidegger, Karl Jaspers, Protestant, Gabriel Marcel, he was French and Catholic, Ortega y Gasset, I think that's how you say it, Jean-Paul Sartre, Paul Tillich, a conservative Protestant theologian. The more literary representatives of existentialism are E. Albee, F. Arabal, Simone de Beauvoir, who married Sartre. Woman. No. The famous mistress of, Samuel Beckett, who was an American who wrote in French. He lived in Vermont or one of those places where there's some still French speaking, and so he wrote plays in French. That's how he's an American playwright who wrote in French. Albert Camus, who is just awful. Genet, Ionesco, Franz Kafka, leftist. Pinter, Rilke, also leftist, and Unamuno y Hugo. My Spanish is really good. I studied it for a while, but then I gave it up. Too many irregular verbs. The Spanish is known for that. In all existentialist thought, there is an absorbing interest in human existence or human living. This existence is not that of the physical or chemical level or of that of the biological realm. Rather, the existence in question is what might be designated broadly as ethical or moral existence, for the existentialist is concerned with the problem of what it really means to exist as a man. There's another, stupid question. I'll tell you, you get up in the morning, you wash, and then, if you're a pagan, you just go get something to eat, all right? You use the bathroom, and then you go to work, and, that's existence as a man, okay? It's very simple. Oh, you have a question? Yes.
Yes, Excellency. The first paragraph of page 63, I would like more explanation on that paragraph because it seems to somehow make sense what he says there, but I want to get the error in everything he says there.
Well, the error is not in making Christianity practical. Obviously, that's not that incorporating Christian doctrine into your life. That's not an error. It's in denying that there are speculative truths in Christianity. See, it means that it's simply a way of life. It's not a doctrine. That's the error of it. All error contains some truth. An erroneous system contains some truth. Protestantism has some truths in it. And those truths are borrowed either from the faith itself, the Catholic faith, or from natural reason, or natural theology, as we call it. That's where they come from. And so that there's hardly ever an erroneous system that is completely devoid of truth. So there's a truth in what Kierkegaard is saying, of course. And he is actually reacting to the paganism and faithlessness and atheism of Hegel. And in that sense, that reaction is praiseworthy, but he has an inherent error, and that is that there are no speculative truths contained in Christianity, that all it is some sort of personal way of life. Okay? But you're always going to find some truth in practically. I can think of some big exceptions in what every erroneous system has. All right. So, what does it mean to be a man? How does one live a truly human life? You eat, you burp. What are the characteristics of authentic human behavior? Authentic. It's all sick. Whereas Kierkegaard's question was how one exists as a true Christian, the modern existentialists, nearly all of them atheists, are asking how one exists as a true human being, as opposed to a false human being. Imagine sitting around and thinking about this problem. Go out and work and make some money. Get a real job. You'll find out what it is, You can buy a house and get a car and other things, You can go places and do what you want. I mean, these people are sick people. They're sick. Yet this is the operating system of the world. The term existentialism is also used to show its opposition to essentialism, which they say is meaningless speculation. That's St. Thomas. They are concerned with man's concrete existence in the here and now. The existentialist is not concerned with the universal, but with the individual. The interest in the individual arises for several reasons. Most existentialists are wary of systems of speculative thought as avenues of approach to problems of human existence. What are they involved in except speculative thought? It's like the skeptic who says there's no such thing as absolute truth. Wham, wham, wham. There's no such thing as absolute truth. That's his absolute truth. What are these people talking about? They're philosophers, except some system of human life and thought. The existentialist regards such systems as abstracting from the particular and unique features in each human situation that make human living the complex and difficult thing that it is. It is not complex and it is not difficult. It's very easy to be a human being. What makes it complex and difficult is that you are immoral. That's what, and these people, non parlons pas, The disdain for the universal and the abstract in other existentialists arises from the intense interest in human freedom. So that's the cult of freedom from the 18th century and the French Revolution and the American Revolution, the cult of freedom. Since the very nature of freedom consists in some sort of contingency and indetermination, namely the power to will something or not to will it, freedom becomes a rather awkward theme in a speculative system such as Hegel's, obviously, where the idea controls everything, which regards all natures as necessary deductions from one or the other. One from the other, excuse me. The existentialist sees this determination and necessity as the enemy of all that he holds precious. So again, this is a reaction to that very systematic and crushing system of Hegel. He had an immense influence, both in a positive sense, in and I say positive, that means he influenced people in his own ideas, but he also influenced a reaction to him which was erroneous. This is true especially of Sartre and Camus, who make freedom the very essence of man, which is totally absurd. Freedom is a quality of the will. The will is a faculty. The faculty must adhere to an essence. It is impossible that you have a subsistent will. Only God is his own will. He's saying that freedom, which is a quality of the will, so an accident of the faculty, is the very essence of man. Then, too, most existentialists see the abstract and the universal as an indignity toward man. For these perspectives degenerate human existence, the human being, the individual person, into an object or a thing, an it. If you do scholastic philosophy, you become an it. Did you know that? You're all its. You lose your humanity. Have you been noticing that? I mean, this is really sicko. What they don't want is the imposition of truth and morality. So this is their system of throwing off objective truth and objective morality. That is becoming an it. So they want to live with their mistresses and do everything else that is filthy and dirty and have a justification for it. So they won't be its. Let's see how we're doing on time. Consciousness and freedom. Because existentialism is concerned with the individual as a conscious self and a responsible agent, as a subject and a thou, rather than as an object and an it. Consciousness and freedom are central themes of all existentialist thought. Man becomes truly existent only when he leads an intensely conscious life in which he is vividly aware of all the exigencies, decisions, and problems of human living. Well, that justifies abortion. See, they're not conscious, and no one's really conscious of them. So they're not human. They're not doing all of these things. The existentialist demands that men should become conscious of themselves as reflective beings whose existence must be interpenetrated with thought. Well, of course it is. As soon as you open your eyes and smell things, etc., you're producing thoughts. Of course it's true. Why do we need Sartre to tell us this and all these other idiots? He insists that they become fully alive to the richness inherent in each experience. Which makes no sense whatsoever. That's really a stupid thing to say. That they live a life that is vibrantly alert to all the anguish, burden, and care of existence. I mean, how would you not be alert to that? You know, something blows up in your face, you're not alert to that? You know, your furnace doesn't work anymore and it's freezing cold, you're not alert to that? One becomes free only by having a personal interest in things, by making decisions, and by consciously following one's own choice. So freedom of choice is the God. Although objective science and the scientific method demand that the knower be disinterested and free from passion. Existentialism contends that the individual be personally involved in the situation and that he make his decision with passionate concern. Passion ordinarily clogs the mind, but they think it should, be part of it. Far from advocating disinterestedness, the existentialist urges that the self become totally engaged in life. Well, who isn't? That one have a strong and radical commitment to existence. Make sure you get your 3 meals a day. This is it's, like a comedy. That one consciously, freely, and passionately be involved in one's ultimate concern. So the couch potato, for example, is very, very involved in being a couch potato. To sit around on a couch and watch television and eat food the whole day until he or she is 400 pounds. That's their purpose in life. They're good existentialists. This is really, this is what operates the world. It's a source of amusement. But it is what is operating the world. All of these sick ideas. That's why we have such a sick society and sick politics and everything. Sick. It's important to understand this. That's why you have this course. You wouldn't understand it otherwise unless you saw all of this. The next is anguish and absurdity, but we're going to save anguish and absurdity for tomorrow. Sartre says the world is absurd. That's what he says. And hell is other people. And as I said, well, I won't say it. It's today's date. February.